So this is the edition of the KhoodeelaarTV channel, timed at 1440 hour, broadcasting the banner of the Baby Angel Geronimo editions. Baby Angel Geronimo is in South Gloucestershire in southwest England, and this baby was born as a beloved alpaca in New Zealand. And this baby is the world's bestest baby angel, Geronimo, the most authentic witness, criminality, evilness, personified by the various perpetrators in posts and positions in the state of the United Kingdom. And we shall be updating on the baby angels, witnessing 24/7, witnessing the violations and the depravity perpetrated, committed by the evilness personified by the evil ones, including the liar Boris Johnson, who was imposed as the UK's Prime Minister, and he was complicit with the evilness imposed at the UK DEPRAVED department. So let's check on the details of the DEPRAVED lies. It's the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. These criminals are supposed to be for environment, food and rural affairs, but the liars. Every single department, every single so-called organ of the United Kingdom state is manned and womaned essentially for the perpetration of lies, untruths, and denials. That includes the National Health Service, so-called. And we shall be talking about the National Health Service later in this edition. We shall be talking about the National Health Service in context as part of our continuing world exclusive original analysis of the denial of the principles for which the National Health Service was conceived and set up 25 years ago. And as I said, in the last edition of this particular program, we didn't broadcast anything on the 3rd of July, but we did broadcast the latest one then on the 2nd of July. And we have said in between that date and now that the Guardian newspaper, for example, talks about various groups and classifications of doctors as part of its so-called reporting of the crisis, the current crisis in the NHS. But it doesn't talk about what ordinary people say. And by ordinary people, we mean the majority, the overwhelming majority of the people for whose care and treatment a health service exists. So the only time that the Guardian and the rest of the media have anything to say about the NHS is when they talk about the various disputes relating to the alleged low pay on the part of the employees and the alleged lack of financial capacity on the part of the anti-NHS forces that represent the conservatives. Now, what actually happened during the so-called pandemic was that, according to published by the Guardian, for example, at least 10 billion pounds in 2023 prices. They say were given away, but there is no accounting. If the argument is true that the reason why the NHS is in crisis is because there is shortage of money, then the amount of 10 billion pounds, being given away within the so-called budget or the so-called kind of framework of the NHS by the UK government, that is staggering. 10 billion pounds is more, much more than is the amount necessary to pay for every part of the NHS that is supposedly deficient in money. So the fact that this is happening and the fact that the so-called Labour Party, because the Labour Party's founding aims are themselves being denied by the political murderer of the Labour Party, and this is why we call him the political murderer of the Labour Party. Even after Matthew Hancock has admitted about the misallocations and the misprioritization of the resources that were available for the correct use of the NHS in caring for people. Even after this confession, there is no real noticed or noticeable comment, let alone a diagnosis of this in the name of the Labour Party, which is the official opposition, because the number of MPs that belong to one particular party after the Conservatives, which has got the 2019 December election-based majority. So that's a series of points that I've just made about the Labour Party being already politically dead, even with the self-serving opportunists, the vast majority of members of parliament, that shows the purpose to be fulfilled or carried out, discharged by the opposition party is invalidated, denied by the members of the opposition party. And the fact that the Conservatives voted in the last 72 hours to prevent any local council or any state agency from voting against injustice. In this case, topically, injustice done by the State of Israel. The fact that the Conservatives have done that, they have banned this, and the Labour Party in opposition, even inside or outside of the parliament, has gone along with that, shows another evidence that the Labour Party is dead, politically dead, already committed political suicide and is committing political suicide. What have the so-called Palestine solidarity badge-wearing members of parliament have to say? Really nothing. And this actually goes back to the 19th century. The 19th century, when the Indian National Congress was established. And this actually was repeated during the following calendar century in South Africa. The African National Congress was set up. Notice the word Congress appears in both. And the fact that this word Congress appears in both is not a coincidence. It appears in both because the concept of these parties in India under the British imperialism and South Africa under the British imperialists, Western imperialists. The idea of these parties were conceived by the imperialists themselves. So much so that the African National Congress was playing a dead part. The ANC was playing a dead part, while on the surface crying and making token gestures about the opposition to apartheid regime in the late 20th century. It wasn't stopping apartheid. And the same thing happened in the case of the Indian National Congress, which became the vehicle dominated by the Hindutva ideologues. Hindutva ideologues' domination meant that there's a 1/5 of the population of the subcontinent which is Muslim, was being deprived of basic franchise, basic say, and this was happening even after the emergence of M.A. Jinnah as a leading voice in the Indian National Congress, and his efforts to bring about a united position between the Hindus and the Muslims against the British imperialists. It was ignored, it was misunderstood, and it was rejected by effectively, the Hindutva-based leadership of the Congress, thus forcing the creation of the All India Muslim League. And the All India Muslim League remained compatible with rational cooperation and solidarity with the Indian National Congress, which kept on, persisted in refusing to recognize the overtures of cooperation from the Muslim League. So the All India Muslim League and the Indian National Congress were, in effect, treated as the representatives of the Muslims and the Hindus in the subcontinent by the British imperialists. And the British imperialists, represented by the last Viceroy, Mountbatten, whose wife was sleeping with Jawaharlal Nehru with Mountbatten's knowledge. So there was an illicit relationship between the Mountbattens and Nehru, that is to say, the British imperialists and the Indian National Congress leadership, including the bedroom adultery. Like Winston Churchill used his son's wife to become a prostitute and sleep with as many influential Americans as she could in order to elicit information from the wealthy Americans. As part of Churchill's strategy, what effectively meant was that he would then blackmail them into getting them to put pressure on the US administration to support the British position against the Nazi Germany. So what is happening now is that despite the fact that there is this thing called Palestine Solidarity Movement or campaign in existence in the United Kingdom, it is dead. The state of Israel is increasing its ferocious attacks, not just on parts of the existing Palestinian territories, but territories that have been repeatedly assaulted by the very powerful military machine that the Israel state has. This last few days, the attacks have been on Jenin. The attacks on Jenin forcing tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians to flee their homes in desperate search for safety and survival. kind of people from in Ukraine you cannot see any similarity at all. The Ukrainians are given 1,000 times more prominence and recognition than the Palestinians by the British press, the British media. So these are the points we are making. There is no need for actual historic